Hi, welcome. Glad you're here. Um, I am going to be talking about some questions and answers. I'm just getting them up here from about pranayama. I had some questions the other day, which I thought were really good questions about pranayama. I'm just trying to find them. Give me a sec here. I had some questions about pranayama the other day. I thought it was really relevant and important to talk about pranayama because the breath is life, of course, right? It's such an important topic. And as yoga professionals who teach breathing practices, most of us do, even if you're teaching belly breathing, most of us are teaching some form of breathing practice. So my idea with doing the live stream was to give you some insight into pranayama, how to teach pranayama practice that's not only effective but also safe. When I first started to study yoga, I learned a little bit of pranayama. That was way back when, in the 70s, really. Well, that's when I got introduced to it, in the 70s. I'd say I started studying it in the late 80s. And at that time, I learned some pranayama techniques, including like alternate nostril nadi shodhana, and I learned belly breathing back then, and some other simple techniques. And, so you think, oh, this is great. It feels really good in your body. I think I learned breath of fire too. It feels really good in your body. But then when I spent time in Asia with some of my Indian teachers, there were some messages of caution, like be careful when you do pranayama. This could cause problems. Now, of course, that also goes to the opposite extreme. And I've heard cautions such as you'll go crazy if you do the pranayama practices wrong, so perhaps if you have a genetic or a structural disposition towards mental health imbalances for whatever reason, for genetic reasons, for epigenetic reasons, for reasons of because of your traumatic history, particularly adverse childhood experiences, perhaps the nervous system has developed in a way that pranayama practices could exacerbate a mental health challenge. I think there's no doubt about that, actually, in my mind. But to make the statement that you're going to go nuts if you do pranayama wrong is also, problematic because they're, for most people, most of the time, that's, it's not the case. I will say that I've met several practitioners who've done a lot of quick, fast breathing practices, hyperventilating breathing practices. And it does seem to arouse kind of a rajasic or a hyper state of the nervous system. So, that's interesting. That's a kind of a chicken and the egg thing. It's like, was the person kind of hyper to begin with, and then they started practicing pranayama and it made them more hyper? Or did they start practicing pranayama and that made them a hyper person? I don't know how you answer those questions, but I think that's something interesting to look at, because in terms of Ayurvedic concepts, many times we're drawn to practices that are not necessarily helpful or healthful to us because that's our constitution. For an example, somebody who's very vata might love to drink kombucha and smoothies and eat rice cakes because those are vata things that make you more vata. So we get attracted oftentimes to the things that are not that healthy for us, right? So that could be very true with the pranayama practices too. Nevertheless, I think it warrants, because it's such an important practice, I think it warrants our careful study and self-exploration, right? So studying the practices, learning how to do them, and then being the scientist and the petri dish yourself, being the experiment yourself, and seeing how it is affecting you. Okay, so here's the question. I love your Subtle Secrets of Pranayama ebook. Thank you. Do you have any specific highlights about using or teaching alternate nostril breathing? So there is something about that in my Subtle Secrets of Pranayama ebook, which, by the way, I don't think is on my website right now, but because we have taken it off and it's part of my my online course. So, if you can't get it, you can always send me an email. I can find a copy for you to sell you, but it's part of the whole Slow Yoga Revolution series now, so it's in there somewhere. So anyway, let's go back to this idea of alternate nostril breathing and specific highlights. So I do not teach alternate nostril breathing to the public. I'll teach it in a yoga therapy context, but I don't teach it in classes. And the reason is because the nose brain, these mesolimbic structures that sit right on top of the nasal cavity, are highly involved in emotional states. The nose, the sense of smell is the one sense that does not get mediated through the thalamus as it goes up to your brain. It goes directly into the limbic areas. And therefore, I'm a little bit careful about messing with the nose, particularly with alternate nostril breathing. One alternative that I think is safe and interesting to practice is the no hand alternate nostril breathing, where you visualize. And by the way, after visualizing it for a while, you may start to be able to do it without your hands. I can practice, because I've practiced a long time, I can practice Nadi Shodhana without using my hands. And, not that that's such a great thing to be able to do or whatever, but it does make the practice more subtle. It's interestingly more subtle. So the practice is just visualize the breath flowing in through the left nostril, flowing out through the right nostril, and then flowing in through the right nostril and flowing out through the left nostril. It's kind of lovely. And you just get that interoceptive experience. So that is one way that I love teaching an alternate nostril type breath without actually putting my hands up there and messing around with the mechanisms. That I think for many people, they're very useful, but this sort of blanket statement that Nadi Shodhana is soothing and it calms down everything, I feel like that is a sort of like, it's sort of like a vitamin C approach. Vitamin C cures everything kind of approach. It's sort of like that. I think, and vitamin C for most people is not harmful either. It might give you diarrhea if you take too much of it, which may be the case with Nadi Shodhana. I don't know, but with Nadi Shodhana, I feel like you have to be just a little bit mindful that some people it may not be appropriate for, particularly because I work with so many people with mental health problems. Particularly, that's one of the reasons I stay away from it. Okay, then here's the next question. Where in an hour class would you put a few minutes of pranayama practice? Where in an hour class would you put a few minutes of pranayama practice? The way that I learned is, there's two ways I learned. One is meditate a little bit, do a bit of pranayama, get your mind in a subtle place, and then do asanas. So I learned that first. And then I studied with Gary Krafsow, and he does the other way. He says, it's in the Yoga Sutras. You should do your asanas, then your pranayama, then your meditation. And the way that he does it, and it's a very lovely system, is you use the asanas as a way to create space and create openness and to optimize the respiratory musculature. Use the asanas, breath-centric asanas, to optimize the respiratory musculature, so then your pranayama is deeper, more powerful, better, and can take you into a meditative state, which I also think it's a brilliant equation. It works really well in that system. The idea of staying with the meditation pranayama system is also powerful and useful. And particularly if you're trying to create very subtle states in the nervous system. So sometimes like waking up first thing in the morning and going right into a meditative state and then into pranayama, it's beautiful, without doing asanas. So I am not of the school it has to be one or the other way. I think they're both useful depending on what you're trying to do. And I think pranayama helps to prepare, or I should say meditation helps to prepare your pranayama. So as that breath is moving in and out and you're mindfully aware of it, you are more likely to reap the benefits of actually the prana and not just optimizing the mechanisms of respiration, if that makes sense. So I go both ways with it. So where are you going to stick it in a class? It's up to you, depending on what you're doing. If you're really teaching breath-centric asanas, then put it at the end. and don't do, and I should also say that I don't do any kind of like intense pranayamas. I don't do intense pranayamas anyway. That's just not me, but I would never teach a bigger pranayama at the beginning of class. I would always put that up towards the end. Okay, and then do you usually share the benefits of pranayama, or do you let them just have an open mind about whatever effects that they garner from doing the practice? So do you usually share the benefits of pranayama, or do you just let people have an open mind? That's a good question. Also, in the sense of asanas, do you share the benefits, or do you let people have an open mind? I did a little live stream on this a couple of weeks ago. According to the Yoga Sutras, there's 3 ways of knowing. There's our own direct experience, then there's our inference, our logical reasoning mind, and then there's the authority of what someone told you. So I think having all 3 of those is useful, so a little bit of information can't hurt anybody. What the texts say about and the gurus say about pranayama, sure. And then let people have their own experience. So I think it's useful to integrate those 3 things in any class setting and be mindful that you're not overdoing any of them. You can't like just dump benefits on people. They won't remember them anyway. Well, some people will, but most people are not going to remember all the benefits. So a little bit of benefits and lots of experience, I think, is really useful. And let's see, I think that's the last question. Yeah. So if anybody on has a question, yeah, feel free to leave it. I don't see any other questions, but feel free to leave a question when you watch the video. And it's been really nice having you here. Thanks for being here. And I'm going to try and do this every Thursday if I can. I'll try to be here every Thursday for another Q&A session. Check out my website for my latest free guide, which is called 5 Secrets All Yoga Teachers Need to Know. And it's about the benefits of slow, mindful practice. Thanks for being here. Namaste.